Okay, let's do the Gimel Amud Aleph in the Moed Katan over here. So the Mishnah said a statement that during Shavuos, the Mishnah, the first Mishnah on Beis Amud Aleph, said a statement that during Shavuos that one is allowed to. So the statement that the Mishnah said that one is allowed to during Shavuos to water the fields, and the Gemara was wondering, how could you possibly do that? How could you water? Isn't that a prohibition of the Torah to work in your fields on the seventh year, on Shemitah? Wouldn't that be prohibited? And the Gemara gave two answers. The first answer the Gemara gave was that all of Shemitah during nowadays is only midrabanan. And since it's midrabanan, okay, so they were lenient when there is a loss of the Beis Hashlochen that needs to be watered, so they allow you to do it. It's not, there is no such a thing nowadays, Shvius of the Torah. That's one answer. The other answer is no, it goes like the opinion that there is Shvius of the Torah nowadays, but the work of watering the field is not a prohibited work of the Torah. It is only prohibited midrabanan. He quotes that the Gemara brings down that he answers. Rava says that the work, the type of work, really, we can go with the opinion that Shvius nowadays is from the Torah, but that type of work of watering the field isn't prohibited from the Torah. So the Gemara challenges this and says, Veloy, and no, in other words, you're saying that watering the fields would not be a prohibition of the Torah? But let's take a look. But didn't we learn in a Brisa? Of course, Rava is an Amoira. He suggested that the watering is not a prohibited work. He basically says that the only works that you're not allowed to do would be pruning and that kind of work, but watering is not included in the prohibition of the Torah. That was Rava's argument. The Gemara says no, but that couldn't be true, because we learned in the Brisa. In this Brisa, we're going to see that essentially all kinds of work are prohibited on Shavuos, not just pruning, as he says, as Rava said, but all kinds of work are prohibited on Shavuos. So the question will come back, how come our Mishnah says that you can on Shavuos? He's trying to say that watering is not a malacha that the Torah prohibits on Shavuos. It's taka the Shavuos applies nowadays, but watering is okay. But he asks him, how could you say that? Well, Tanya, but didn't we learn in Abraisa? The pasuk says, that's what the Brisa says. The Brisa is going to tell us that everything is prohibited, basically. It says, with the exception, we'll see, the exception at the end of the Brisa. The fact that Torah writes it in a little bit of a strange way. The Torah says, your field you shall not sow, and your orchard you should not prune, versus saying, don't sow your field, don't prune your orchard. It starts off, your field, don't sow, your orchard, don't prune. Why does it mean? That means to tell you, no, that you feel you can't do anything. Not only you can't you sow, but you're not allowed to do anything. Not only can you not prune, but you can't do anything. So this is what the Brisa says. So the Brisa says, Ein li elo zirua v'zimun. So if we just learn the Brisa inside the way it's written, so the only thing we know is sowing. The Torah says clearly here, and the Torah also says pruning. Those are the two things that the Torah specifies. So if you just read the words in the pasuk, Sodcha loy sizra, don't sow your field, and your orchard don't prune. Ainli ella zirua vizimur. I only know that it's prohibited on Shvis. You're going to get malchus if you do it, if you're going to sow or you're going to prune, because there's very clear prohibition of the Torah against it. But the issue, what we want to know is minayin linichush uleidur. Nichush, as Rashi explained before, nichush means that you remove the bad grass. That's a movement. It's a form of pruning, but this is done by the grass. And there's different ways of doing it, as Rashi will explain. Nichush means bad grass, you uproot it with the roots. There's another type that you just cut it from the top, but nichush, Rashi will say in a minute, means you uproot the bad grass, you uproot it from the ground. Idur is something which you do, you dig. Rashi says Idur is shechoifer tachas hagefonim lerapuya aro. That is that you are digging underneath the vine to soften the ground, to soften the earth. These are other works. They're not sowing and they're not pruning, but I guess nichush is not considered pruning. Pruning would be cutting away some of the dry branches from the vine. That would be pruning. But this is removing the bad grass. Or idur is that you are digging underneath the vine in order to soften the ground. Idur zoktrashi shechoifer tachas hagafanim. You are digging underneath the vine, lirapuya ara, to soften the ground. That's another kind of work. It's not sowing, it's not pruning, or likisuach. Kisuach is another way of nichush. That's just cutting, not uprooting the bad grass, but cutting it down. Kisuach sakrashi also is ba'asabin. That is by grass. You call it kisuach. Rashi says min hatoivim, that you cut the bad from the good. And Rashi explains v'loy hainu nichush. This is not the same as nichush, because over there the ma'akir ho'ikodim min hakarka. Ben ichush, you are uprooting the root from the ground. The lozeh, but for this, for kisuach ein ikrim, you don't uproot it, but on the top you cut. Another kind of work. So basically, how do we know that this nichush, uprooting kisuach, the top, either digging under the gefarim, how do we know that it's also? Talmud loymar, that's why the pasuk says, Sodcha loy karmecha loy. Instead of saying loy sizra sodecha and loy sizra, it says sodcha loy. You feel not, it comes include anything. Karmecha loy, no. Talmud loymar sodcha loy karmecha loy. Rashi explains. Me the loy kisif, since it doesn't say loy sizra sodecha loy sizra karmecha, don't sow your field, don't prune your orchard. Ella, but it says the other way around. Sodcha loy sizra. Your field you should not sow. Karmecha, your orchard loy sizra. You should not prune. Mashma, so that it appears should that sodcha loy. First, without you have to read it like without the tizbar. Just sodcha loy. Field no karmecha loy, meaning don't do anything in there. Sodcha loy karmecha loy. Loy kol melocha shebesodcha, no to any work in your field. The loy kol melocha shebekarmecha, and no to any work in the kerem. The two words of the work in the field that we had before were the nichush and the kisuach. That's in the field, and the idur, which is done in the kerem and the orchard. No, you can't do it. Another set of kinds of job that we can't do on Shvis, we learn from the Pasuk. Minayim she'ein mekarsimim. Where do we know we're not mekarsim? That's also pruning. But that is talking about trees now. Before we were talking about the field, we're talking about a vine. Now we're talking about a tree. Where do we know that you can't do mekarsimim? Zoktrashi hainu zimur. That's the same thing as pruning that we said before. Eloshikirsum shayich bi'ilonis. But yeah, kirsum applies to trees. By trees, by a vine, you prune. I guess over there you're tizmer, kan mecholi tizmer. Over here, the pruning is called kirsum. So how do we know that you can't do that either? And the same thing is ve'ein mezardin. Mezardin is also, mezardin means that you cut away the dried out branches or even moist branches, like there's too many branches over there and they're pulling too much of the moisture. So there is a process called mezardin. Mezardin, Dr. Rashi, that's cutting off branches that are dried out and moisture and moist, both of them. The tree has too many branches, so you cut away some. It's another type of work that you do for the tree. And also, ve'ein mefazgin bi'ilon. Mefazgin bi'ilon means to support a young tree which is not able to stand alone, so you support it. Mefazgin soimchin ha'ilon shehuranon yeser midai, a tree which is too ripe, too fresh, and it can't stand alone. So I guess you support it with a stick or with another tree. But that's another way of work in the field. Again, in this case, it's more talking about the trees, work that you would do with a tree. How do we know we can't do that? Talmud Loimar, the Pasuk says, Sod chaloi, karma chaloi, the same thing as we said before. Nothing in the field, nothing in the kerem. Loi kol malacha she besodcha, v'loi kol malacha she bekarmecha. No to any work in your field, and no to any work in the orchard. Okay, for another job. Also, this is also mostly with trees. Menayin she'ein mezablin. How do we know? Mezablin is put manure, to put manure by the bases of the trees so that they grow better. Mezablin, Zokrashi, manichim zevel be'ikrei ha'ilon. That is to put this manure by the root, by the bases of the tree. You can't do that either. How do we know? I mean, this is all not clear in the pasuk, but we're learning it out. They ain't also ve'ein mefarkim, and you're not allowed to take apart. If you have built by the base of the tree, there's rocks over there, and I guess they disturb the tree. You cannot remove these rocks from there. The other thing, what you would do for the trees, another job would be ve'ein ma'avkin. Ma'avkin means put dust on it to cover up. You have a tree that the roots are visible. Ma'avkin. Rashi says sheshorosh of nidin, that the roots are visible. And then you cover it with dust. You cover it up. I guess it's better for the tree that the roots are covered with the another job that you would do in the field. All this you're not allowed to do. Another thing you would do in the field you're not allowed to do. Ve'ein ma'ashnin bi'ilon. You're not allowed to smoke on the tree. I guess they would put smoke to get rid of the worms that are on the trees. So they make a fire, and the worms would run away from the from the smoke of the fire. So that's also yes, doing work with the trees. Ma'ashnin, Rashi, oisin oshon tachas ha'ilon. They would make smoke underneath the tree, kedei sheyinsharu hataloyim she'olov, so that the worms that are on the tree should fall down. Again, how do we know that you're not allowed to do that? Talmud loymar, sotcha loy karmacha loy. For the same reason, because the way the Torah wrote it, sotcha loy karmacha loy, so we know that you can't do any work in the field, you can't do any work in the orchard, which includes. Okay, now we have an exception, work that you are allowed to do. So the thing like this, Yochel. So you might think, since we're prohibiting all kind of work, maybe you also would think lo yikashkesh tachas hazesim. Maybe you should not dig like we have before. We said that when you dig under the we have digging under the vines, you have also digging under the olive tree. So Rashi says yikashkesh means hainu idur. That's the same as idur, which idur we learned before that you're digging under the vine to soften the ground. So there's also the kashkesh to under a olives, it's called kashkesh. Under the vine, it's called idur. Kashkesh hainu idur. It's the same as softening the ground by gafanim. Elo idur begafanim, but the softening is by the gafanim, the kishkush bezeisim, and that's by the olives. So you might think that you should not be allowed to be mekashkish, dig under the olives, or you may think you're not allowed to do it. The Gemara is going, the Bryce is going to conclude you are allowed to do it. I want to bring in a Rashi, which is for some reason printed in the Gemara a little further, but it addresses this piece of the Gemara, because here the Gemara is going to say you might think that you're not allowed to do that, and the Gemara says you are allowed to do that. That's the Bryce is gonna conclude. It's rhetorically saying, since we have just said that you're not allowed to do all those kinds of work, so you might think you're also not allowed to dig underneath the olive, mekashkesh under the zaysim. You might think v'lo ya'ader tachas hagafanim, and you're not going to dig and soften the ground under the gafanim. And also, we'll see weiter. But the pasuk we're going to learn from the pasuk you could do that. Rashi is going to address. So here you're saying you're allowed to. We just learned before that you're not allowed to. In the Bryce it said before, idur is not allowed to. So how could you say all of a sudden kishkush and idur are allowed? We're going to wait for the Rashi. Rashi is printed later on because here it doesn't say it you're not allowed to. It only says you might think that you're not allowed to dig under the olives, or you're not allowed to dig under the vines, or the lo yimale nekoyim mayim, and not to fill the cracks with water. This is referring to under the olives you fill them with water, I think. The lo yasa ugiyos legafanim. For vines, they make a little, Rashi says, they dig a trench, a little hole, under the vine to put water in there. And I guess this, the koyim mayim is also similar by the olive tree to fill cracks with water. You might think you're not allowed to do that. So we say, no, you are allowed to. Why? Because Talmud Loimar, That's why the pasuk says, "Sodcha loy sizra." The Torah says, "Your field you shall not sow." Now that verse starts off by saying that in the 7th year it should be rest of rest, and then it says, "Your field you shall not sow." Why do we have to specify what you're not allowed to do? We said the field should rest. That means totally. The fact that the Torah specifies Sodcha loy sizra, your field you shall not sow, and Zriya b'chlal hoysa, Zriya was already included, because it says b'chlal hoysa in the beginning. The pasuk says ubashana hashevis, on the 7th year Shabbos Shabbosim there should be rest. Rest means everything. So we already know. Why does the Torah, the Lama Yotzusa, why does it come out? Why does the Torah specify specifically don't sow? Lahakish eleho loimerloch. The Torah wants to equate and say the only things you're not allowed to do, that things which is similar to zriya sowing. Ma zriya, what is sowing is specific, both avodah shebesoda v'shebekerem. Sowing, you do both. In the field, you sow, and in the orchard, you sow. The only work that is prohibited to do on Shviz would be something which is both special to the field and special to the orchard. Af kol avoida shebesoda v'shebekerem. Also, any kind of work which is in the field and in the orchard. Kigoin, Rashi says, Av kol avoida shebekerem, so the bekerem. Kigoin, kol hani proti, like all these details, all of the things that we talked about before apply both to a field and to an orchard, with the exception of these, what we're talking about now. Yotzo kishkush v'idur. Those are softening the ground under the a palm tree or under the vine. Umayim b'nekoyim v'ugiyos, and then the water that you put in the cracks and in the holes you make in the ground. Sheinam b'shneim, that only applies to a tree, it doesn't apply to a field. In a field, you don't soften the ground underneath it. There's no trees over there to do the kishkush and the idur. Also, there's no trenches over there to put in for the field. It's just a one long field that you're sowing. So therefore, that excludes that. So basically, these three things that it said over here, which would be the kishkush and idur, softening the ground and bringing some water to be able to soften it, doesn't apply to both. Then that does not apply to Shvius. Then you can do that. But so what does the Gemara want to bring out from this question? Rava said that bringing water to the field would be something you're allowed on Shvius. Here you see you can't do all these work. I mean, bringing water applies to everything. So how could the Mishnah say that you can bring water to the Bleis HaShlachim on Shvius when there doesn't seem to be a reason to be allowed to do that, because all these works are actually Asur and Asur min HaTorah, as it seems from this Brisa. But one thing Rashi says, there's another Rashi over here that belongs really to before, but it's after we just concluded that softening the ground is okay, but that seems to contradict that we learned in the beginning of the Brisa that it was not okay. Rashi addresses this in the Rashi, lo yikashkish tachas hazeisim v'lo ya'ader chulu. So Rashi says, "V'im tikshi," you're going to ask, "Osur idur le'il," but previously we had already prohibited the idur to make the ground softer. We prohibited. How's he saying to you can do that? And Rashi brings from the Gemara later on. Kotoritz lekamon beugiyos. So later on, the Gemara discusses later on Daled, on the Daled, the Gemara discusses the Daled on the base. The Gemara discusses that. I want to ask, how could we say you can't make these ugiyos? You can't make so over there the Gemara also has a contradiction because it says ain't oisin ugiyos like finding you're not allowed to do, and the Gemara says that we find that you could do it. I mean, our Mishnah Bryce also says you can do it, but the Gemara answers that there's a difference. What kind of these ugiyos, these trenches, these holes to hold the water we're talking about? The Gemara says that you're not allowed to make new trenches for water, but old ones are okay because an old one, there's a trench there. There's no real. You're not really creating. There's not really that much tircha over there, but there is more tircha when you do by the new one. You're creating a whole new hole over there, so that's why you're not allowed to do it. So just like the Gemara answers over there, the difference between new ones and old one, the same thing is for these the trenches, the walls that we're talking about over here, that the difference between the beginning of the Mishnah and the end of the Mishnah at the Brisa, the beginning and the end, is it depends upon new ones or old ones. New ones you're not allowed to, but old ones you are allowed to. I'm again over here. We're talking right now. The Gemara is thinking min haTorah. I think that later on we're talking already with the Rabbanon. This is still under the thought that it's min haTorah. Maybe that's why the Rashi is at the end. But in any event, what is the whole? Let's leave out the details and we'll go weiter. But let's get back to the point what we're trying to bring over here. So the Gemara asks, Rava came up with an idea that you're allowed to do every work on Shvi'is. Only what you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to sow and you're not allowed to prune. But you're allowed to do all other work. And the Gemara brings the Brisa in which it seems like you're not allowed to do. He tried to say that because it's midrabanon, you're allowed to do all this. You're allowed to do all this work in a Beis HaShalachim because it's a pseida hefsed. The Rabbanan allowed you on Shvi'is also because it's not really osum in Torah. But here in this Brisa we bring a bunch of pesukim, so it seems like all this is also from the Torah, not midrabanan. And the Gemara answers really it's midrabanan. The Gemara's answer is that this is really midrabanan, even though the Gemara brings pesukim. A lot of times when the Gemara brings a pasuk, it doesn't really mean that the Gemara thinks that that's what the pasuk means. It's just a support to what the Chachamim say. This is really midrabanan. The pasuk is just leaning on it because that's not really what the pasuk means. But this is just leaning on that to come up with a reasoning. But it's all midrabanan, and therefore the Chachamim were matir by Beis HaShalachim is not a problem. Midrabanan, Zok Rashi, kol hani midrabanan. All the above that we can't do are not Torah prohibition midrabanan. Ava midaraisa lahave elos miro b'tzira kedamrin li'il. Min haTorah, the only thing is if you're pruning or you're cutting off the grapes, that's not allowed. As we said before, only these things are also, and other things are not. That's what Rav has said, and that's why it remains. We have all this psukim. The pasuk is merely a support. uses the pasuk as support for his contention, but it's not really a Torah command. Okay. Frag die Gemara, the kishkush bishvis mishori. Over here we learn that you cannot that you are allowed to actually. You're allowed to dig. We're talking about digging under the vine and the under kishkush is under the olive tree for the olives. The Gemara seems to say that it is permissible. That's what we just learned. That from the pasuk that is permissible. The kishkush b'shvis mishari is then kishkush, the softening of the ground on shvis is by the olives. Is that permissible? The Gemara says, well, conceive, because the pasuk says, and this is a pasuk in Shmois Pericham Gimel. It says, "Bahashvis," and on the 7th year, Tishmit Tano, you should relinquish, Unetashta, and you should let it go. What is the two languages over here? On the 7th year, talking about the field, you should let it slip away, and you should let it go. Tishmit Tano Netashta. So we learn from that pasuk that tishmeteno means milakashkish. That let it go means don't dig, don't make a bigger, don't soften the ground underneath it. Unitashta means milasakil. It looks like this is a pasuk here too.
What's milasakil?
Milasakil, Dr. Rashi, that means to remove those, like skila, like the word that's the stones, lahoitzi avonim min hakerem. That is to remove stones, like we learned before, to remove the stones from the orchard. So the issue is, so we see quite clearly over here. Now again, we have a pasuk tishmetenim elakashkish. Now I guess the Gemara could say the same answer it gave before. That it's midrabanan, but the question is midrabanan. The question is, here it seems that the rabbanon allowed. It's not only that the Gemara said the prohibition is not minat Torah. The prohibition is all midrabanan, but the Brisa says that kishkush is actually permitted. It's not only that it's permitted, but here we learning from the pasuk. Again, we're not saying it's from the Torah, but because I guess it's still midrabanan. But it says that you're not allowed to makashkish. So how does it say in the priva you're allowed to makashkish? Amar Rabbi Ukva Bar Chama, says Rabbi Ukva Bar Chama, today kishkush yehave. There's two types of this kishkush that you're softening the ground. Chad ibruye ilana. One is meant to make the tree healthy. That is to improve the tree, make it a healthier tree. In other words, it's not essential it's to give it more strength, but it's not a loss over there. That kishkushi is not allowed. That's what we learned in the Brayta, is not allowed. But the chad situmi pili, one of them is kishkushi, is to close up the cracks of the tree. The tree is cracked, which means, and if you don't do that, the tree is going to falter altogether. Abruyi ilon also, to make the tree healthier, is prohibited. The havi mishum revocha, because that is extra. That is to make it more comfortable, but it's not a necessity. The high, the shori kishkush, and the fact that in the Brisa we allowed kishkush, hainu stume pili, that's only in a case to close the cracks. And the one that it's asur is in the case to make the tree healthy. So when we are allowed to do kush is when it's dangerous for it, but tabruyi to just to make it healthier, we're not allowed to avoid a loss. You're allowed. Stumi pili shari. Why are you allowed to close up? Shari, the Isbaim should say though, because there is a loss over there. Okay, so that's why this is the difference. All right, we have a very similar piece of Gemara. We can go through this quickly. A very similar piece of Gemara like the Gemara we just learned. Itmar. But this is a memra. From Amaroim. What is the happens when a chodesh b'shvis, one who plows the field during the seventh year, during Shemitah? So we have Rabbi Chaim and Rabbi Wolosow. We have two opinions. Rabbi Chaim and Rabbi Wolosow. Chad Omar Loike. One says you would get lashes. That chodesh is a prohibited malacha on shvis from the Torah. The Chad Omar Ein Loike. One says that you're not going to get malchus because chodesh is not a prohibited malacha of the Torah. Why? What does it depend on? Whether we say that plowing is a Torah malacha that you would get malchus or it's not. So the Gemara suggests, shall we say that their disagreement whether you get malchus is in what Rabbi Ovin and Rabbi Lo said that they're arguing about? As we'll see in the Gemara, it's a question in the pasuk whether we prohibit everything or not. And according to Rabbi Ovin Omer Rabbi Lo, we prohibit everything, and therefore plowing would also be included. According to those who disagree with Rabbi Ovin Bar Rabbi Lo, then only the things that the Torah prohibited specifically, but we don't include anything else. So what? But Rabbi Ovin Rabbi Lo did not really talk about our case. He talked about a different case, a general. He gave a general rule. We have a rule, what's called klal upratu klal. You say in the morning davening, Rabbi Shmuel, if you learn over there, it says there's klal upratu klal. Klal upratu klal means first the Torah says something in a general way, then the Torah gives a detail, and then the Torah says again a general way. In our case, for example, the Torah says you have to rest on the seventh year. That's a general rest, doesn't say. Then the Torah specifies you shall not sow and not prune. That's a specific. And then the Torah again says a general way, Shnas Shabbosin should be a year of rest. So you have a klal. The seventh year should be resting, and then you have details of the prohibition, then you have another. Now, normally when we have a klal upratu klal in a regular, so over there we say that we're going to learn, the Torah wrote in such a way that everything which is similar to the detail is included. So even though the Torah just says don't sow and don't prune, but anything that is similar to sowing, anything that's similar to pruning, everything that would be included in that. If we use that logic, then we should include also plowing is prohibited. The Torah says don't sow and don't prune, but plowing is also similar and you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But Rabbi Ovin Bar Rabbi Lo that he says here, he makes a distinction about that rule that we say klal upratu klal. He says that would only apply if they all match up, that the klal, the generality, would be in the same language as the detail, which means the general was, let's say, a prohibition. If, let's say, the pasuk said, don't do any work on Shvis, and then it would say, don't plow and don't prune, specific. And then it would say, no work is done, don't do any work. So all these things would have been in a lav. You have the klal as a prohibition, the prata prohibition, and the other klal. Or the same thing is true if they were all three positives. But in this case, the general is a positive, is a say. It says shnas, and the seventh year you should rest. What is the no? I get the pasuk. The pasuk starts off with Ubashona Shvi Shabbos Shabbosim. Seventh year should be Shabbos Shabbosim. That's a positive. That's a mitzvah to say. Then it says don't sow and then don't prune. Then it says again Shnas Shabbosim. He says in that case we don't apply the rule of klal uprat to klal. We actually apply the rule of klal uprat, which means it's just one general. And then there's a specific, which means that only the specific would be prohibited. So the Torah mentions no sowing and no pruning, that's only prohibited. So this is what the Gemara is trying to say, that shall we prohibit plowing or not? Shall we say that this is dependent whether we go by Rabbi Oven, Rabbi Loah, who would apply here the rule of klal uprat to klal, would not apply it, and therefore you would only be prohibited what the Torah says, or we don't go like Rabbi Loah and we would include everything in it because you have a klal uprat to klal, so everything becomes like the similar to the prat is included. Let's look at the Rashi in the one. What did Rabbi say in the name of Rabbi Loah? That kol mokim shenemar klal be'esa uprat beloisasa, wherever the klal is written in a positive, like in here it says should be a rest, and the prat is beloisasa. The prat is a prohibition. Rashi says kol mokim shenemar klal be'esa uprat beloisasa. Like in our case. The pasuk says, "Ubashono hashavi is Shabbos Shabbos and Yil. Seventh year should be a rest of rest, which means this is a klal rest, but it's a positive. That's a klal. Hainu asay. This is a positive. Then it says which is prat, tells you specific, not sowing and not pruning. That's hainu loisased. That's a prohibition. So what does Rabbi Ovin say? In that case, ain done in oisa b'klal uprat klal. We will not judge it. We will not treat it like a klal uprat klal, which means that we're not going to prohibit everything. Only what the pasuk says. How Rashi look at it? Ain done in oisa b'klal uprat klal. V'af al gav diksiv klal basrei. Even though there is another klal after the two details. There's another klal. We're not going to teach it. We're not going to deal with it as a klal pratu klal. Over here it says the end Shabbos Shabbos. Kloimar, what we're trying to say here is ainly din the shar klal pratu klal sheksuvim kulei be'esay belav. This is not the same that any other klal pratu klal which are written either all in a positive essay or all in a prohibition. The Omar, over there we say, klal upratu klal I atadon elo ke'ena prat. That when you have a klal upratu klal, the way we need to judge this, things need to be similar to the detail. The marbi kol midi the domi prat, which would be including everything which is similar to the detail. So then we would prohibit plowing anything. But we don't do that according to Rabbi Law. Because it's different from Esa to Loisasa, we look at it as a klal uprat. Hoyul, the nishtana mishar, klal uprat klal. Since it's different than all other klal uprat klal, Amarinon, over here we would say, Ein b'chlal elo mashe b'prat. This would be just like a klal and a prat, that the klal only includes the specific, which would mean that hani ein midachrin eloi. Only what the Torah says, and others know. So therefore, what do we come from this? The man, the Omar Loike, the one who says you will get malchus for plowing, less like the Rabbi Ovin Omar Rabbi Lo, he doesn't hold of the distinction that Rabbi Ovin Rabbi Lo said that we don't put a klal uprat klal over here, and therefore he holds we do say a klal uprat klal, and therefore we ask a chodesh, similar to Zereya, what everything is in there. Umando Bareina Loike. And the opinion says you don't get malchus, is like the Rabovin. He does hold like Rabovin, and therefore, in this case, the only thing that is also what the Torah said. And the Torah said only Zerel, and not anything else. And the Gemara says loy. No. That's not what they're arguing about. The Kula Alma, less like the Rabovin, no Rabbi Lo. Nobody holds about Rabovin, no Rabbi Lo. And we will definitely say a klal uprat klal over here. And we'll definitely say a klal uprat klal over here. And therefore, anything that is similar to Zreya, which plowing is, it's prohibited. So he's mandomar loike. So the one who says you do get malchus shapir, makes sense. The kulam less than of it, mandom l'shapik, kedom de dashinim klal uprat klal, because we said we do a klal uprat klal similar to Zriya and Sizmer. So nothing is, you're not allowed to do anything. But what is the reason of the one that says you don't get malchus? Omalach. This is what he will argue. His argument will be there. If pruning should be part of sowing, because that's actually essentially sowing by removing the bad ones. The same thing is with tzira. When we talk about removing the grapes, that's part of cutting the grain. It's the same thing. So why did Rachmana? Why did the Torah have to specify how come? The Meimer, the Ahani Tulus of the Mechayiv, Atul the Achrin Aloy Mechayiv. Torah is telling you that you're only going to be Chayiv. This is the Gemara. The Gemara brought this originally, that idea, that only for these Tuldas you're Chayiv. The Tulda, which is Zemira and Betsira, which are Tuldas of Zereya and Koitzer, you'll be Chayiv. Tulda Achrin Aloy Mechayiv, but on other Tulda you would not be a Chayiv. And that's why plowing doesn't get malchus, because yes, you have a klal uprat klal, everything good, but we have another pasuk that specifically excludes and says the only thing that we're going to be liable for is mira and mitzvah. Goes back to the same argument that the Gemara said. This was the argument that the Rava said before, that's why he permitted bringing the water in our Mishnah to the field, to the Beis HaShlochim, because he said it's midrabanan. And the Gemara challenges the same like before. The Gemara Veloy, and no, we're going to go back, we're going to reread the whole Gemara that the Gemara brought before. But Tanya, but we learned in the Braisa that says, the Pasuk says that not to sow and not to prune. So the Braisa, we only know sowing and pruning. How do we know the digging and the under the vine, the other kisuach? Go back to the Taicha before. It says not any work in the field, not any work in the orchard. And all these three things that we said before that you can't do by the tree, which means and kol malacha shebekarmach lo. You can't do anything, not in your field, and not none. How do we know you don't do these malachas in the tree? Talmud leimer also sat chaloi karmach chaloi kol malacha shebesat chaloi v'kol malacha shebekarmach chaloi. And the Brisa concludes, Yochel lo yikashkish tachas hazeisim. Maybe you would think he should not be under the zeisim mekashkel, the other tachas gefanim, and not allow the other the gefanim leimal mekoy mayim, and v'lo yasu ugris la gefanim. Talmud loymar sotcha lo izriya lo sizra. Zriya b'chlal hosa hoisa v'lama yotz. So Zriya was already included in the Shabbos Horus. It should be the Lama Yot. So why did the Torah specifically say Leisir? Everything like before is full brisa. Lakish Elo Loimalach Mazrim Yechedes Avido Shebesoda Shebekerem Avkol Sheavida Shebesoda Shebekerem. So here we see clearly from the Psukim that all these tools are prohibited as well. How could you say that only the same question like on Rava? And the Gemara answers midrabanon, v'kro asmachta ba'alma. This is really only midrabanon, and the pasuk is merely an asmachta. Okay, let's leave it over here. Just say, this week we're reading already the Parshas Bracha. Hope everybody had a good Yom Kippur, but we're already doing the Parshas Bracha, and we're moving on to the blessings that Moshe Rabbeinu blessed all the Yidden before his passing. And there's an interesting, the Torah describes about Moshe Rabbeinu as his passing. It says that all Jewish people mourned for him. But it says, Kol Bnei Yisrael, that means the sons of Israel. And Rashi points out that when it came to Aaron, over there it says Kol Beis Yisrael, the entire Jewish home. Also the women, for Aaron, also the women mourned. But for Moshe, only the men mourned. Why? And Rashi explains, but there's two interpretations, but Rashi explains that for Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, he was like beloved by everybody because he always made peace between people. He made peace between a husband and a wife, and he made peace. So everybody adored him, and everybody. So when he passed away, they were all crying. And the Rebbe asks, but Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have that level as Aaron. So the Rebbe asks, why would we mention that? Can you imagine making a eulogy for Moshe Rabbeinu? We're putting it in the end of the Torah, making a eulogy for Moshe Rabbeinu. And we say, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't so good as Aaron. We say, he only had the men. And why would we say it over here at this point? The Rebbe brings out an interesting thing. The Rebbe says that the way Aaron made peace, he would sometimes, what they call today a white lie, he would change some of the facts in order to make peace. But that's already, a little bit of a compromise on the truth. But Aaron did that. Moshe Rabbeinu's level was truth. He couldn't do it. So in his lifetime, he couldn't descend to that level. Some people, in order to make peace, you must come on to saying, changing some of the, not a lie, but not the full truth, not to change it a little. But Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to tell us, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the end of the Torah by Ruach HaKodesh. He wrote about his own death. And he's trying to tell us that at the end of the day, there is something about Aaron in order to, this actually shows the greatness of Moshe, that he appreciated, and he said, really we have to do, and even if sometimes we have to do, a white lie, if we have to bring about peace. Peace is the most important and essential part. And if that's necessary, that's the message that Moshe Rabbeinu leaves us with, that, we have to, even though it wasn't his level and he couldn't do it, but we have to reach every Jew. And sometimes if we have to do a little bit of that, okay, so let it be. Not to say a lie, but to change a little bit, which is permissible. Okay, so let's leave this over here. And next week we'll take a break. because of Yontif. And then we'll get together again on the week after Yontif. We'll get together.
It's not Yontif next
Okay.
week. Is it?
In the meantime, everybody have a good Yontif, and thanks for joining, and hope to see everybody after Yontif again. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thank you, Rabbi.
It
would be appropriate to talk about Moed Katan on Chol Moed.
That's right. We have that's it. We can apply all the laws that we learned.
So, but for now, I won't do any trimming.
You're not gonna water your garden this Chol Moed.
Okay.